Hey, Bio Wants to Do, it's Mr. Yance in the Halloween edition of Notes today. So we're going to go through the difference between a plant and animal cell, and hopefully you'll see the difference, and we're going to introduce how things move, okay? I'm getting rid of the head because it's way too hot. All right, so there's the Halloween edition. So in plant cells, there's some major differences between a plant and animal cell. One of the big differences is something called plastids. Plastids are organelles found in only plant cells, and they act as factories and chemical factories, and they store food. Where it gets a little confusing is there's three types of plastids. So this is like, think of plastids as Roman numerals, and these are subheadings: A, B's, 1, 2's. So kind of stay with me here. So there's three types of plastids. There's chloroplast. We'll start with it first. That is the chemical factory of a cell. Chlorophyll is probably the best known one. You guys have probably heard of that one. That's what makes plants green. So when you see green leaves and stems and those things, that's what you're looking at. And I think I got a lot of links here, so I'm going to go ahead and go this full screen. I'll probably disappear, which is okay. See if this will load up. Let's try it this way. There we go. So chlorophyll is the green pigment. It's where photosynthesis takes place, and you'll see a picture of this in just a second. This is what we looked at in lab the other day, so you saw that virtually. This is where photosynthesis occurs in these little black splotchy things right here. Very common. I think my link's going to be messed up. Very common pigment. Okay, so chlorophyll is a very dominant pigment in plants, and see if I can get back up to my notes. That's the one you probably heard of. That's a chemical factory. That's where it captures sunlight, it does photosynthesis, it makes carbohydrates. Ones you may not know a lot about is xanthophyll and carotene. They're yellow and orange. You probably heard of carotenes and carrots. Beta carotene is a very common pigment we find in carrots. That's what makes them orange. These you don't see in the spring and summer. They're there. They're accessories. They help chlorophyll with photosynthesis, but the only time they show up is this time of year in the fall, because what happens is deciduous trees like maples and oaks and elms, they have to shut down photosynthesis because they can't survive our cold winters. So when chlorophyll dies off, these appear briefly because they linger a little longer. So you see them for a few weeks, and then they fade, the leaf turns brown and falls off the tree. So they cannot do photosynthesis by themselves. They have to have this dominant chlorophyll, and that's where it gets where you see it in this time of year is when chlorophyll fades and these show up and then they fade. Okay. Another type is chromoplast. Chromoplasts are your reds and blues. They give flowers and fruit their color. That is something that a little botany lesson. So why are fruits, tomatoes, cherries, apples, why are flowers so beautiful and pretty and have lots of color to them? It's got to do with chromoplast. And you got to understand, what is the function of a flower? What is the function of a fruit? Okay, and I think a lot of people don't realize that these things are the function of a flower in a plant is the reproductive organ. There's a stamen and pistil, a male and female part inside that flower, and since they can't move, how they pollinate, how they reproduce, they can't go from place to place, so they rely on pollinators, bees and insects and that type of thing. So that's why they want to be beautiful. They want to attract those insects and bees so they get pollen on them, and then they fly and they pollinate other plants, and that's how it works. The fruit, this is crazy. A fruit, an apple, a pear, you might change the way you think about things after I get done with this lesson, but that is a ripened ovary. That sounds kind of crazy. If you think of an apple, I bite into an apple, I get to the core, there's seeds in that apple. So what plants are relying on is they want to make the fruit desirable, taste good, look good. That way animals eat them, carry them off, and disperse their seeds. Or we eat an apple, we throw the apple core out the window, we just dispersed apple seeds like Johnny Appleseed. So that's why they have these chromoplasts. It's got to do with their function and how they operate. All right. So we got chloroplast. That's one type of plastid. Chromoplast. So try to keep those straight. This third one is not really a pigment. It has color to it. Leucoplasts are used to join glucose together. If you remember from a previous chapter, we talked about polysaccharides, cellulose, starch, those macromolecules. This is the plastid that puts these things together and makes starch and cellulose and those types of things. And that's the main function of plastids. We're either making food or we're storing food. And that's kind of the object of what they do. Okay. So plants have plastids. Now, this is kind of an interesting one. I put vacuoles in there because now we have vacuoles too, so don't put this down as a difference. But I want to put this in there because the rest of the fall leaves, sometimes we see reds out there. That's not chromoplast. Where do they come from? They come from something called anthocyanins. Vacuoles in a plant are a lot bigger, and they have these water-soluble pigments called anthocyanins, which, by the way, are very healthy for you. Anthocyanins will dissolve only at low temperatures. So as the day gets shorter and the temperatures drop, like last night it got down to 30, okay, then these will dissolve and they'll turn into beautiful, bright, vibrant colors like red, and you see that out there in fall leaves as well, okay? Some vacuoles also get rid of waste and contain food, but they do have some other functions. So that's why it gives these plants their other shades. And here's the thing, we take these for granted in northern Indiana because we see fall colors. We don't think much about it. I have a sister-in-law that lives in Fort Lauderdale that always likes to come up this time of year and always say, why are you coming up? This is not a great time of the year. I mean, it's 85 in Florida and you're coming up to Indiana where it gets down to 30. But she wants to see our fall leaves because think about this. In tropical places or warm climates like southern Florida, they don't get fall leaves because not that they don't have anthocyanins, not that they don't have xanthophyll and carotene and all these other pigments that our trees have. They're the same trees. They just never change because it never gets cold enough for long enough for that to happen in Arizona or Florida or Nevada or someplace like that. So, we take it for granted. I still think my sister-in-law is crazy coming up here and seeing that, but that's basically something that we see around here. All right. So to summarize this, 3 differences. Good test question. I'll put this as a short answer on next week's test. Plant cells have cell walls. Animal cells do not. Plant cells have plastids. Animal cells do not. And animal cells contain centrioles. That's the only one that goes the other way. Okay. So know those 3 differences that will be on the test when we take our test next week. All right, let's shift gears. So we're done with organelles. We're done with parts of the cell. Let's talk a little bit about how things move. I think this is what I want to spend a little extra time on. Diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. What are those terms? What do they mean? It gets kind of confusing. So we're going to start with the simple one first, and I'm going to do a virtual lab. We'll do a lab on this next week. Hopefully you can see this in action. I'll videotape the actual lab that we're doing so you can see this and get the data from it. We're going to start with something called passive transport. So we're just going to do a couple slides today. Every living cell exists in some type of liquid environment, a water type of environment. And one of the more important things that a cell membrane will do, and let's backtrack for a minute. Cell membranes have this fatty bilayer of fat, and we have those big boulder of protein stuck in that bilayer of fat, lipid, phospholipid bilayer, and we have to regulate what comes and goes through that membrane, and that's one of the more important things that maintains our homeostasis, keeps us constant. How do we do that? That's kind of complex, okay? So let's start with passive. If you think of a passive person, that's someone who avoids conflict, doesn't like to get involved in things, doesn't like war, doesn't like to be, they're peaceful, okay? Same way here. There's no extra effort put in. There's no energy that has to be used. Passive is a transport system that kind of works behind the scenes, and it just does its thing, and we don't have to worry about it doing its thing. It just does its thing. All right. So basically, let's start with simple diffusion. Simple diffusion is, and here's the key, we're going from areas of more concentrated to less concentrated. That is really, really important, and we understand that we're going from areas of greater to lesser. Don't have to do anything. It just automatically does that. Nature does that. Gravity helps with that. So if we move from particles of any kind, it could be sugar, it could be salt, it could be anything other than water. We'll talk about it in a minute. That is called diffusion. So let me say that again. Moving from an area of high concentration to low is diffusion. Okay. Now, you have to understand what solution and solutes are. We'll talk more about this, but solutions are like water. A solute would be like salt or sugar or something like that. Okay? Now, where it gets confusing, and this is what I want to talk about today. So that's diffusion, movement of anything, sugar, salt, whatever. Okay? Iron, potassium, any kind of stuff that we need to move in and out of cell. Oxygen, CO2, you can go both directions. If we're talking about the movement of water, that is called osmosis. Okay, so that's something we'll talk about later. All right. So diffusion is a driving force behind the movement of any substance across a cell membrane. Here's the thing, and this is what you see down here at number 6, and why I put it in red. It doesn't require any energy. So a passive system requires no energy whatsoever. Okay, it just does its thing. We do it, and we don't have to do anything to make it go. It just goes naturally from high to low. Okay. Now, last thing, and then we're going to call it quits. Okay. Cell membranes have these proteins and things. Yeah, let's stop there. Okay. I don't want to get too confusing here, so we're going to stop there. So hopefully that makes sense. Maybe we're going to stop. I don't have my little clicker. Oh,